Chapter 10. The Modern Period. Let's learn. History, concept and scope. Importance of dates. Periods in history. Historical sources of information. History, concept and scope. When terms like modernity and postmodernism are bandied about freely in academia and in the media, people are bound to ask at some point, so, when did things switch over from modern to postmodern? Or, when did the modern era begin and end? Or, what events marked the transition from the pre-modern era to the modern era? Any answers to these questions are likely to be arbitrary. History is a record of important incidents and events. It is about the lives of the people who made a difference to the world. It is hence a subjective study of events that occurred in the past. Each historian has a different perspective to an event. According to the British historians, history of British rule in India is all about the lives of different Governor-Generals of India. It begins with the first Governor-General, Warren Hastings, and ends with Lord Mountbatten, the last Viceroy. However, an Indian historian will focus on India's development under the British rule and will write about the lives of the common people, their means of livelihood, the food they ate, the clothes they wore, and continue with the changes in social norms. The history of the commoners is different from that of the Governor-Generals. Importance of date. Certain historical events need to be seen in the context of dates. A major part of history is about kings and rulers. Ascension of a ruler to the throne, important battles fought by him, and succession of power are some of the events which can be expressed with reference to time. Dates are important for correlating such events. There are no precise dates for events that take place over a period of time. Some dates are significant because of a particular set of events. For example, we do not know the exact dates of important events that took place during India's freedom movement, but can we pinpoint the day, month and year when the feeling of nationalism took seed among India's masses? Hence, history is best studied and understood in context of time spans and not dates, since processes in history are gradual and in continua of time. Some events do not happen on a particular date but take a very long period to materialize. For example, the freedom of India took many years of mass struggle to turn into a reality. Such events are studied in the context of various other events. Now let us think outside the realm of kings and kingdoms. Would you not like to know when did Indians start drinking tea? What people did when there was no electricity? When did people start weaving cloth or making glass? How did people travel from one place to another before vehicles were invented? The questions can be endless. Knowing about all this is also history. Periods in history. Periodization helps us understand the sequence in which various events occurred and also their effects. It captures the significant features of a particular period and helps us to differentiate it from other periods. James Mill. James Mill was a Scottish economist and political philosopher. In 1817, he wrote A History of British India. In 1817, he wrote A History of British India. Mills divided Indian history into 3 periods and called them Hindu, Muslim and British periods. Many cannot accept James Mill's division of Indian history into the Hindu, Muslim and British periods, nor can they accept the reasons he had given for that division. Criticism of Mill's periodization. When we talk about Hindu period, we have to accept that Muslims were also present during that time frame. When we talk about Muslim period, we have to accept that Hindus were also present during that time frame. Rulers in ancient India belonged to many faiths, so it is wrong to divide history as Hindu and Muslim period. A period in history cannot be characterized only through the religion of the rulers. Moreover, the British projected the so-called Hindu and Muslim periods as the Dark Ages to prove that the British rule would take India towards enlightenment. This was a deliberate attempt to stop Indians from taking pride in their legacy. Periodization by other historians. Some other historians divided Indian history into 3 periods, that is, ancient, medieval, and modern. Historical interpretations. History being a study of events, processes and causes and effects in a given time span, is quite subjective in nature. Thus, different people view history differently. Gandhiji's initiatives during the freedom movement were seen as being subversive and anarchist by the British, while for our countrymen it was a solemn and patriotic effort to free India from the British rule. So, to get to the truth, we need to use a number of sources and versions. Historical sources of information. A number of sources tell us about the modern periods in Indian history. They can be grouped under primary and secondary sources. A primary source of information for historians is the official records of the British administration. The Mughals introduced the culture of maintaining records. The British believed that every instruction, plan or policy had to be clearly written down. They kept written records of every key instruction, meeting, transaction, investigation, plan, policy decision and agreement. This was necessary for proper study and debate about an issue. They attached record rooms with all the important administrative institutions to preserve the documents. Major James Rennell was an English geographer, historian, and a pioneer of oceanography. He prepared the map of India as directed by Robert Clive. In the early years of 19th century, documents were carefully copied out and beautifully written by calligraphers, specialized in the art of beautiful writing. By the middle of the 19th century, with the spread of printing, multiple copies of these records were printed. The British built specialized institutions like museums and archives to preserve important documents. They erected a number of monuments such as the Gateway of India, the Rashtrapati Bhavan and the Parliament House. While these records provide valuable information, we need to be careful while interpreting them. We should keep in mind that those records were written from the perspective of the British officials. They may have overlooked certain issues or may have modified certain aspects to suit their needs. Secondary sources are second-hand accounts of events or sources that derive their information from the primary sources. For example, newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, reports, reviews, articles, books, etc. The British preserved the important official documents because these served as records of what the officials thought, what they were interested in, and what they wished for. According to the British, writing was more important than speaking, as the documents in archives and museums can be utilized for reference at a much later period, whenever required for studying or debating. These can also serve as an information or proof of any decision or action taken earlier on some matter. Info Hive. Britannia is the name given to female embodiment of Britain, always shown wearing a helmet and holding a trident, the symbol of power over the sea. Hence the patriotic song which begins, "Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves." The figure of Britannia has been on the reverse side of many British coins for more than 300 years. Surveys. The British believed that a country should be known in a thoroughly detailed way to rule it in a better manner. For effective administration, the British carried out a number of surveys. Detailed surveys were conducted in the 19th century to map the country. Surveys were also conducted about flora and fauna, revenue and land. The British made a large number of topographic maps. By the end of the 19th century, censuses of all the Indian provinces were carried out every 10 years. This helped in collecting information on the religion, caste and occupation of the people. These surveys have helped historians to collect information about modern India. Brain tickler. Why did the British carry out botanical surveys in India? Indigenous records. Information which is essential for writing the history of a certain period can be gathered from various sources. Apart from the official documents in the archives, historians also gather information from old newspapers, diaries of people, accounts of pilgrims, autobiographies of important personalities and booklets, etc. Personal diaries of personalities like Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, newspapers, popular books like The Discovery of India and Glimpses of World History, autobiographies of personalities like Mahatma Gandhi, and accounts of travelers and pilgrims give a deep insight into the lives of the common people. Dadabhai Naoroji wrote the book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, in which he highlighted the exploitative nature of British rule. Bal Gangadhar Tilak used to run 2 newspapers, Kesari in Marathi and Maratha in English, which made people aware of the greedy intentions of the British. The British tried to suppress the press during the national movement, but this attempt was unsuccessful. Information found in newspapers is varied based on incidents that have happened across the country, whereas the police reports are limited and localized. Because of this fact, sometimes the information historians get from police reports is not as useful as it is from old newspapers. However, for any incidents, the newspaper may not quote all the reasons behind it and could be biased as per the thinking of a reporter, while in police records we could find some evidences for an incident and unbiased reports. The history section in this book will look at the history of India in the last 250 to 300 years, the fall of the Mughals, the gradual expansion and consolidation of British East India Company, the subjugation of Indian princely states, the revolt of 1857, a century of the Crown's direct rule in India, India's freedom struggle and eventually the end of the British rule in India. Info Hive. Coins issued by the government authority, photographs and paintings depict the contemporary times well. Recap. History is a record of important incidents and events. Periodization helps us understand the sequence in which various events occurred as also their effects. James Mills divided Indian history into 3 periods and called them Hindu, Muslim and British periods. Some other historians divided Indian history into 3 periods, that is ancient, medieval and modern. The British built specialized institutions like museums and archives to preserve important documents.